12,000 years ago, there were no cities, no writing, no kings, and no money. Humans were wanderers, following herds and seasons, owning nothing they couldn't carry. Then something strange happened in a dusty valley in the Middle East. A group of people stopped walking. They planted seeds in the ground and waited. This single decision would change the human species forever. Welcome to the birth of civilization and the strange story of how writing began as a way to count goats. Around 10,000 BC, the last ice age was ending, and the climate was warming fast. Wild wheat and barley began growing in thick patches across a region called the Fertile Crescent. This land stretched from modern Iraq through Syria into Turkey and down to Egypt. For the first time, food was abundant enough that people didn't need to chase it. Hunter-gatherers began staying in one place for weeks, then months, then years. Some groups never left again. This shift is known today as the Neolithic Revolution. It was not a single event, but a slow, accidental transformation that took centuries. One of the earliest known settlements was Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey. Built around 9,600 BC, it predates farming villages and even pottery. Massive stone pillars carved with animals were arranged in circles by people with no metal tools. Strangely, this means religion or ritual may have come before agriculture, not after. People may have gathered to worship first and started farming just to feed the crowds. If true, it flips everything we assumed about how civilization began. As farming spread, villages grew larger and stranger. Around 7,400 BC, a settlement called Çatalhöyük rose in central Turkey. It housed up to 8,000 people, tightly packed together. There were no streets between the houses, homes were built wall to wall, and people walked across rooftops to get around. To enter your home, you climbed down a ladder through a hole in the ceiling. The dead were buried beneath the floors, right under where families slept and ate. Çatalhöyük had no obvious rulers, no temples, and no clear social hierarchy. It was one of humanity's first experiments in living shoulder to shoulder with strangers, but the true birthplace of cities lay further south and east, in Mesopotamia. The name means land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Around 4,500 BC, a people called the Sumerians settled this region. The rivers flooded yearly, leaving behind rich, fertile soil. With irrigation canals, farmers could grow far more food than they needed. Surplus food meant something revolutionary. Not everyone had to farm anymore. Some people became potters, weavers, priests, soldiers, and rulers instead. This division of labor is the true engine behind every city that followed. By 4000 BC, the Sumerian city of Uruk had grown enormous. At its peak, it may have held over 50,000 people. Uruk had massive temples, organized streets, and surrounding walls for defense. It is considered by many historians to be the first true city in human history. But Uruk faced a problem no village had ever faced before. How do you keep track of grain, livestock, taxes, and trade across thousands of people? Memory was no longer enough. A new invention was about to be born, not for poetry, not for stories, but for counting sheep. Sumerian accountants began pressing small clay tokens into wet clay tablets. Each shape represented a quantity. So many jars of oil, so many goats, so many baskets of grain. Over time, these symbols became simplified, faster to draw, and more abstract. Around 3,400 BC, scribes started using a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped marks into clay. This system became known as cuneiform, from the Latin word for wedge. It is the oldest writing system known to history. The very first written sentences were not myths or laws, they were inventory lists, receipts for beer, bread, and barley. Writing was originally a tool of bureaucracy, not literature. Only a small class of trained scribes could read or write it. Becoming a scribe required years of brutal schooling, copying the same symbols thousands of times. Slowly, cuneiform expanded beyond numbers into full sentences, laws, and stories. Eventually, it recorded the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written down. Writing had transformed from an accounting trick into a way to capture human imagination itself. Remarkably, writing wasn't invented just once. In Egypt, hieroglyphics appeared independently around 3200 BC. In China, oracle bone script emerged around 1200 BC, also independently. In Mesoamerica, the Maya developed their own writing system thousands of years later, with no contact with the Old World at all. Different humans on different continents, separated by oceans and centuries, all solved the same problem the same way. They needed to remember things bigger than any single brain could hold. With cities and writing came something else entirely new: law. Around 1750 BC, the Babylonian king Hammurabi carved 282 laws into a massive stone pillar. The laws covered theft, marriage, debt, and punishment, applying to an entire kingdom at once. For the first time, justice wasn't decided by a chief's mood or a tribe's tradition. It was written down, fixed, and the same for everyone who could read it. Cities, writing, and law created a chain reaction. Trade expanded because contracts could be recorded and enforced. Religion expanded because myths could be preserved exactly, generation after generation. Power expanded because kings could issue orders across distances no voice could travel. Everything that followed, empires, religions, science, even the video you're watching right now, traces back to a few farmers who decided not to walk away. It started with a handful of wild wheat seeds in a warming valley. It became permanent homes, then crowded cities, then clay tablets recording goats and grain. And from those humble grain receipts came every book, every law, and every story ever written. Civilization didn't begin with a grand plan. It began with someone simply refusing to be hungry again.